What is going on, fam? My name is Cameron Sammy. This is my good friend Kunal Chatkara, and this is our unscripted podcast where we talk about self-improvement, life, what it takes to get to the next level, anything and everything you can think about. This is our unscripted podcast. How are you feeling today, Kunal?
Feeling blessed, bro. I'm really grateful to be here with you. This is amazing. Glad we got this opportunity. Yeah, man. How are you?
Doing great. I was thinking to start off this podcast with a big start. Let's talk a little bit about generational gaps and how sometimes we have issues with different age groups and thinking that there's certain problems for their time period versus our time period as millennials, baby boomers. Do you think they all weigh equally, problems for different generations?
It's a good question. I think we each generation has its own unique set of challenges, if you want to look at it from that point of view. And I tend to not put myself in a position where I'm comparing so much because it's hard to really say that our challenges today are greater or less than before. Also, not to mention, I wasn't there in the last generation. So just speaking directly from true experience, I think we have a different set of challenges in this generation, in this time period, than maybe the generation prior.
And you make very great points. You're not comparing apples to apples. If you're listening to this and you're a millennial, we understand you have your own set of challenges. If you're listening and you're a baby boomer, we completely understand you grew up in a different time period, and so we came up different ways. With that being said, in our modern day society, people living the so-called rat race. And you see a lot of our friends, family, they're living it, maybe they're struggling, maybe they're making certain sacrifices that they don't really know where to go with it. What do you see in that perspective, or do you have any comments on that for anyone listening that sees themselves in that situation?
Yeah, it's beautiful. And it's a beautiful presentation of what we're kind of dealing with socially. And I think we've inherited a culture. When you said rat race, we've inherited a culture that has taught us to, consciously or unconsciously, to expend a lot of our energy and our focus outside of ourselves, and to have this motivation to acquire something outside of ourselves. Not to say that there isn't a time and place for that, and that hard work doesn't have its own value. Just that I think the term rat race, it really highlights the stress of attempting to get somewhere different than where we are, and there being a lack, coming from a place of lack where I don't have enough, or I am not enough, and I need to do X, Y, and Z to get there, and it's almost as if that rat race doesn't seem to come to an end.
And I love how you said that, because coming from a personal perspective, I definitely saw myself running on that wheel about 4 or 5 years ago, and one day I kind of woke up and said, hey, what am I doing? I'm not happy with myself. I'm not happy with the relationships I have at the place I'm working. Like, I'm just not happy. And it seems like on the weekends, I'm just trying to get away from all my problems. And that translated to going out to bungalow in Santa Monica, or spending money on alcohol, or spending time swiping on dating apps. And it just seems like it's a never-ending spiral. And then when it's all said and done, you just don't feel very good about yourself. So what really helped me was just taking a step back.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. I've never been to bungalow, but I think that's the turning point. It's this shift of this recognition of, wait, am I really satisfied with the life that I'm living? Yeah. Do I feel fulfilled and connected to my everyday and what I'm doing every day?
So for someone that's listening, and maybe they can relate a little bit to my situation, what are a few things you think they could do at the end of the day when they get home, like tangible things? Maybe books they could read, maybe podcasts they can listen to, maybe exercising they should do. How can they reframe their lifestyle in a few tangible ways that maybe they can start to take a step back and look at it from a different perspective?
Beautiful. It's a really valuable question. I think even having that in our awareness is a step in the right direction. Having the question of how can I enrich my life and how can I make a shift already on its own is initiating a sort of inner transformation. as far as practical things, we do live in an information age, and I think there's so much out there that may direct you towards what you can do to improve yourself, self-development, books you can read. So I won't riff on that for too long, but
Well, I like that you said that we live in an information age.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you can elaborate a little bit more. What are the pros of an informational age and what are the cons?
Sure, yeah, I mean,
Because it seems like you can Google anything these days, right?
it does seem that way. And yeah, I think on the pro side of it is that we have the advantage of technology. We have access to knowledge maybe we wouldn't have had 50 years ago. We have access to knowledge that predates our lifetime and lifetimes before us. And there seems to be a solution or an answer to many things. And on the practical level, this can be very helpful and useful, right? For building something in your house or repairing or fixing something, learning how to record a video. These things are valuable and useful. I think it can also be quite a distraction from our inner state of being beneath the mind, more so in the realm of our heart, so to speak, because there is just so much information.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be just a lot of filling the head, and it can be its own distraction.
So
Yeah.
switching over to one very important point, if this isn't on one of the top things that you think about in the morning every day, the topic I'm talking about is nutrition. And one thing I've always loved about you, Kunal, is you're always on top of your game with nutrition. When you go to the grocery store, you know, hey, this product has XYZ ingredients that might not be beneficial to my mental being or my physical being or whatever it might be. And more often than not, I see people at the grocery store or my friends, and they're talking to me saying like, hey, I just got this new item, I just got this new sauce, I just got this new multivitamin supplement. How do they even open up to that world?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it touches back on the information age. There's so much information out there. How do we know what is good information and useful information, and how do I distill that to apply it to my life directly in a beneficial way? Yeah, thank you for presenting that. I mean, nutrition and health and fitness have been such a large part of my life from an early point. At this point in my life, I like to not overstress it, because I've found that can become its own sort of thorn in the foot, or like its own pain point, you know, being so overly consumed by if I'm making the right choice. But from a fundamental, simple level, I think it's really just being clear of becoming more conscious of what I'm putting in my body and how my body responds to that to start with.
Yep.
And then from there, you know, making decisions accordingly. I think we have an overly saturated health and food and industry that doesn't really educate us on what are healthy food choices. And from simple ones, I mean, there's plenty of research you can do here, but I think minimizing seed oils and grain consumption at such a level that we do now, we eat, you know, pasta and breads and a lot of wheat and gluten that honestly isn't prepared in a very natural, holistic way, especially. Whereas if you're going to Italy and you're eating bread that's homemade in a house, with a lot of loving care and attention, and the wheat is properly
fermented properly. There's no
stone ground, and
there's nothing like speeding up that reaction. And by speeding up reaction of certain processes, especially in the USA, we're losing a lot of the defense mechanisms that our gut would deal with when it's digesting. So the reason I bring it up is because, look, I'm out there, guys, I'm talking to people every day, I'm microanalyzing their state of mind, and it seems like a lot of people have a lot of aggravation, a lot of anxiety, a lot of things going on. And then when I go and look at their diets aren't necessarily, based on my knowledge and my journey through nutrition, it wouldn't be something that I would be co-signing on. And then I would think to myself, it makes sense why they're aggravated, but if only they would know, you know, a couple of things, maybe they'd make certain adjustments and feel a lot better. This is not to bash people for having bad diets, but it's just out there to say, like, if you search out for a few bits of information, you can make a couple changes and you might not even recognize yourself in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's a beautiful point that you're elucidating. I mean, I agree with you, and I think on the relative, I see it now, like you brought up this point of anxiety, and I think our state of psychological identity, our personhood, the way we've learned to relate to one another and to life itself is kind of like an underlying state of anxiety. And on the relative level, one way we can enter into a greater understanding and greater health and harmony with our bodies, which is kind of how it started for me about 12, 15 years ago now, is diet and nutrition and becoming more conscious of what we're eating. So,
and they all work with each other, right, guys? So if you're if you're putting your focus on nutrition, but you're not focusing on your mindset, one's eventually going to take over, and you might go back down like a negative spiral. There's nothing ever negative in this world. There's always growth and opportunity. What I'm trying to say is any type of self-improvement task builds on one another, and you only become that much stronger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I personally love the word holistic, because it's like what you're saying, it's a holistic approach to health, and it's not just the diet, but it's diet, it's mindset, it's your physical activity, it's your time that you spend with yourself. It's a variety of things that work in harmony and conjunction with each other to create a more optimized outcome.
And that's beautifully said, guys. And if you're sitting back here thinking, all right, these guys are talking about wellness, health, self-improvement. Yeah, we are self-improvement podcast. That's a big part of our podcast, is spreading our truth to the world, because we've been fortunate enough to have this platform to do so. If you're not hitting the gym constantly, if you're not taking into consider nutrition, what you're putting into your body, if you're not getting new information every day and just going on your own just for leisure, if you're not building your relationships with your family, with your friends, there is a big chance that there's a lot of aggravation there. I think,
Yeah, without overstressing it. I mean, there's weeks where I'm not working out every day consistently. I think there's a harmony that can be struck, and I think absolutely getting some of those fundamentals aligned can have a dramatic impact in our life. Someone who may be suffering from depression has been carrying this diagnosis or this label of like depression or anxiety. There may be things that they can do, and of course, I'm not a doctor, this isn't medical advice, but there may be things that you can do that can holistically, very naturally, from what you put into your body and how you move your body and what you expose yourself to. Are you getting outside and getting sunlight? Are you spending time in nature outside of technology and being, in a closed, dark room?
Are you swiping for 8 hours a day and then not feeling good about yourself?
Right.
They might have effect on one another.
Absolutely.
But are you asking those questions, and are you holding yourself accountable, saying, what am I doing to change that?
Absolutely. And I think that's a great entry point for anyone who feels that they may be suffering or struggling at all with mental health and their own vitality and vibrancy in life. Start with the simple things you can do. Wake up in the morning and get some sunlight.
Yep.
First thing, before you check your phone, before you have your cup of coffee to get going, take 5, 10, 15 minutes if you can spare it. Go outside, take 3, 4, 5 deep breaths, get some sunlight, go for a quick walk around the block. That alone, I think, can have a tremendous benefit on the body and the mind.
I'm just curious, Kunal, out of 100 people, let's say we had 100 people in the crowd right now, and I said, raise your hand if the first thing you do is wake up and check your phone. How many percentage do you think would raise their hand?
It's a good question. I would say at least 60%. And maybe
I'm
undermarking it, because I myself have made it such a point not to check my phone in the morning. So I tend to think that other people don't either. You've realized at this point in your life that starting your day with the first thing you're doing, checking your phone, is not going to be the most advantageous or nutritive for your mind and body.
And so I think as the thought process on that is, first, okay, checking my phone this is for any example, but I'm just using and honing in on this one. Okay, I have a problem checking my phone first thing in the morning. How do I fix it? Well, checking my phone in the morning is a bad habit. So maybe I need to learn a little bit about habits. The next step would be going to your local bookstore and finding good books on habits. And guarantee you, after reading a book or two about that, you might have a few more ideas of how you can adjust that.
Absolutely. And I would say you can kind of shortcut it a little bit. Yes, absolutely. Go read and learn and acquire some insight, expose yourself to new ways of doing things. And really, I think you can just find out for yourself through direct experience. Try it, experiment. Tomorrow morning, instead of checking your phone, hopefully after watching this video and being attentive to the habit, bring it into your awareness, you'll remember in the morning, if you reach to grab your phone, I'm doing that thing again. You can just set your phone down and say, I'm going to go outside for 5 minutes instead. And see how that changes. Find out for yourself how it feels experientially.
Your experience is your biggest teacher.
Absolutely. I think direct experience is our most valuable teacher. There's context, there's life, things are very alive, in the moment. So it's harder to make a prescription based off something we learn or intellectual knowledge.
So one specific example I can give you guys is, I wanted to increase my habit efficiency a little bit and make good habits. So I read a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And in the book, I found that obviously we're humans, we have human-like tendencies, and they look it up with data. People who work with their phone in the room right next to them are more likely to use it. And had I not read that piece of information, I wouldn't have known to make the adjustment, hey, when I want to do deep work, let me leave my phone in another room.
It's fascinating. It
something
seems,
so simple.
right, it seems obvious.
Yeah.
It seems obvious until it's obvious, you
Yeah.
know, and then you actually bring it into action. And it's like, oh, wow, this has a dramatic impact on my life.
And the way that I learn is not the way that you learn or the way that Kunal learns. I'm just sharing these personal experiences. Maybe it hits home with you, maybe it doesn't, but I'm hoping that maybe it gives you another idea. Say, hey, maybe Cameron, I don't like to read books, but I like going on YouTube and typing in short things and short videos and getting my information that way. Maybe that's the way to go. Maybe it's doing it yourself and just kind of biting the bullet and just not touching the phone and seeing how it feels. Whatever you want to do, there's no right or wrong answer. This is a podcast for growth, prosperity, truth.
Yeah, I think just illuminating what's alive for us and sharing it authentically.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. This was, again, unscripted. We're just talking about life things. We can keep going on. How are you feeling, Kunal?
I feel great. I mean, I could talk to you all day.
One thing that did come to mind, which is just a random topic, and we're not doctors again. What do you think about the current consumption rates? I don't know if that's the right term, but what I'm talking about is Adderall.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a different topic.
Because you've taken it, I've taken it.
Yeah.
We're putting it all on the line, guys.
No, it's great. I personally was diagnosed with ADHD from a psychiatrist properly through the Western medical system about 11 years ago. So I was 17, I think. It was going towards my senior year of high school. And what I will say is, although it seemed effective on the level of the surface level, really, at allowing me to focus on one task, it greatly diminished my creative ability. And that was just the start of recognizing the damage it was having on my body physiologically. Not eating, being overly spiked up with cortisol and adrenaline and norepinephrine early in the day, and then having a hard crash at the end of the day. It's a really, really strong compound that I don't think has a place in a natural, harmonious, holistic lifestyle. It causes a lot of damage and has a consequence. You know, maybe if you're using it very, very sparingly and
that's not to say that there's a small percentage of people that can truly benefit from it. I think the argument here is today we are overusing this thing.
Right, to your point of overconsumption.
Overconsumption.
And I think that goes for a majority of the medications being prescribed and utilized, especially for mental health today. I won't say that we're overusing it or underusing it, but I do think we are neglecting that there are alternative things that can be considered that may be just as beneficial, if not more so, without the need or use of these prescriptions. I think instead of it being a first resort, which it often happens to be, it should be a second, third, or last resort for someone who's coming up against challenges with focus or anxiety and depression. There are other things that are worthwhile to explore and implement and find out for yourself if they benefit you.
So let me paint a picture for you, Kunal. We got Chris here. He's a 35-year-old corporate worker, and he's dealing with some problems. He knows nothing about nutrition, health, and wellness. So he thinks, hey, I've been feeling very tired lately. I'm not feeling so good. Let me go to the doctor. Mm-hmm. He goes to the doctor, and the doctor does his diagnosis and says, hey, I want to give you Adderall. Chris starts taking Adderall, and what happens next? Or what should Chris do before going to the doctor, maybe? Again, this is not medical advice. I'm just painting this picture because I honestly believe there's things like this happening.
Absolutely. I think it's a really common occurrence. What I would do and what I maybe would suggest to Chris if he was a friend of mine is that, go to the doctor if you feel inclined to do so. Have your conversation with your medical professional, respect their perspective, get that information. But once you make the decision to take a prescription medication like Adderall, which does have it has a tenacity to lead to addiction. It is an addictive substance. It can be for many people. Before making that decision, because now you've stepped off into that road of now I'm using this and it's helping me with my issue, and we can create a dependency, this relationship on the substance being the source of my help, my solution to my problem. I would say implement some of those things that we're talking about. Do some research on alternative things that you can do to help your focus and your attention, and maybe do a deeper dive to discover what the root of these issues might be. Because it may very well be that he's very unsatisfied with his choice of work, and he's never considered that. And so deep down, he's unfulfilled, and the reason why he can't focus is because he has no connection to what he's doing in the world, which is very much what it was like for me. I was working at a desk job in front of a computer, and I felt no emotional, spiritual connection to what I was doing at all. And instead of being like, wait a second, I'm 18, my body probably wants to be active and out, instead of spending 40, 50, 60 hours a week at a desk behind a computer doing something that means nothing to me, let me consider changing that before I take a medication to make this my life. And I think that goes back to our original discussion of the rat race, is almost feeling like I am dependent on this system to live my life, and I have to do this thing that I actually deep down don't want to do in order to survive, which I think is, we've inherited this culture, and in a lot of ways it's misled us, unfortunately. But there's a great opportunity here, as you were saying. There's growth in all of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
Yeah, like, beautiful.
It's just, like, the whole spiral connects with each other, whether it's positive or negative. Bringing it full circle, you wake up, the first thing you do is check your phone. Why are you checking your phone? Because there's notifications. What are the notifications doing to you? Depleting your dopamine. You go to work, doing work that you don't feel meaningful about, continues to build your dopamine, or to deplete your dopamine. You get home, you don't feel good. Now 6 months later, you're at the doctor getting Adderall.
For your dopamine. Yeah, but to your point is, like, you originally said, why am I checking my phone? And I think because there's this underlying state of anxiety that maybe hasn't been discovered, or this feeling of lack, of like, I want to feel something, I want to feel good. And so I'm checking my phone. It's a very understandable thing as a human, you know, and we're very much far from perfect human beings. And we have many biases and heuristics that we aren't aware of. And there may be things that are compelling us to act or motivating our actions and our behavior that are under the surface. So until we lift the hood and we inspect what's happening inside, it's very easy to just live a life autonomously and rather unconsciously, and find ourselves in a place a year, 2 years, 3 years later where life is now confronting us with this, like, situation that feels rather riveting. But I think that's also a form of grace, because now it's forcing us to wake up to a situation we no longer want to be in, and activating the energy within us to make a shift.
And one of the things you said was, for that example we gave, is when you wake up, I check the phone. Who is checking the phone, right? When you wake up, we're talking about identification with who you think you are. When you're so consumed by the material world, those notifications might matter a little bit more. But when you're soaked into your own inner energy, which is always accessible, checking your notification might not be there. And when you get to your job with a different perspective and outlook, maybe through self-improvement, through reading, through exercise, whatever works for you, you might have a different perspective on that, and you might start manifesting different outcomes.
Beautiful. I am so glad you brought that through, because I think this is the hidden crux. It's hidden unnecessarily, but this is the hidden crux of a lot of our, if not the majority of our issues and problems in our life, is this misidentification with this idea of who we think we are. And if I think that I'm this person who is required to do X, Y, and Z to feel good about himself, you're right. I'm more likely, more prone to check my phone to feel good about myself based on the social feedback I'm getting on that persona. Whereas if I've taken space from that personal identity and I've started to discover the richness that exists within, as you're saying, which is always accessible, now that need to acquire that sense of satisfaction outside of myself starts to diminish and evaporate. It's no longer so tethering.
And we're going to elaborate on this, guys. If you're confused by this podcast, we completely understand. That's what this first one is about, is just to get some ideas out there for you guys. Again, completely unscripted, but
for us as well, I think, it's just airing what's alive and finding out. It's an exploration that we get to take together. It's an adventure.
I'm sure you guys could tell just by listening to us, we've got flaws, we got things that we're working on, but the hope with this podcast is we're going to share our mind and our experiences, and we're going to grow together.
Absolutely, and would, in the same light, love to hear from you and collaborate. Co-creative.
What ideas do you have for us? What questions do you have? Anything you guys want, we're here for you. Let's get it.
Let's dive in. Big love, bro. I'm glad we did this.
We'll see you guys soon.